It's all for you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. Happy Monday evening. My name is Ishmael. I hope everyone's doing well. I have two great guests because I want to touch on this subject when it comes to fatherhood and policy. I know for the longest time, for the past 3 years, Black fatherhood has been going viral, whether if it's on social media, on commercials, we're everywhere, which is important. But also, I think the most important thing is policy, like the things that's intangible that we can come together and put something together to uplift Black fathers that's left behind. And so my two guests are just great at this subject. And so that's why I have them on. My first guest, I call him Uncle Derek, but his name is Derek Phillip. He is the CEO and founder of the Real Dads Network. Basically almost 2 decades of creating resources for Black fathers in New York and just across the country. And then also, again, the returning champ back again, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. Google him, because if you don't know this brother, you need to know this brother, because this brother's been like serving when it comes to just laying down the smackdown of truth and wisdom and just smacking white supremacists in the face. In words, not in fight, but in words. Let me get it right, because I don't want people to take my words out of context. But I welcome you guys. Thank you for joining. How you guys doing?
Great, Ish. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. What I want to start with is perception, because often perception creates policy. If you go back to the drug war, the perception of drug users created these chaotic laws that put a lot of people in prison. So I want to touch on when it comes to the idea of the deadbeat dad became the perception and also became policy that still hinders Black fathers today.
All right, so I guess in regards to a lot of that stuff, just stems. A lot of stuff comes out of the Moynihan report when they started looking at the Black family, and they start talking about how, in terms of the Black family, we have this huge issue going around, this national tragedy where Black men are not taking care of their children. So therefore, they started creating this alarm that, and then we had the Black communities that started jumping in. You had William Ryan's book, Blaming the Victim, started saying, listen, yeah, we may not have Black men there, but we do have uncles, we do have cousins. So they do have men in their lives. So that became that back and forth thing. But I think the reality is that when we're looking at all that stuff, really the issue really is about systemic racism, which has really took a lot of Black men out of the picture. So it's like, and then they started creating these programs that says, in order to keep families intact, you can't have a father in the picture. When we see Claudine, here it is, this family is struggling. You have this man who's saying, I want to be there to help this family. No, you can't be in the picture to help this family, because the whole purpose and the design was to destroy the Black family. So a lot of the attacks were against, Black men. And sometimes we buy into this false concept of what it is in terms of what America say Black men are. Like everybody talks about now that there are 70% of Black children that are born to single mothers. That is totally 100% incorrect. Because statistics, there's children that are born to single unwed mothers. It just says unwed mothers. So the reality is that over 60% of Black children are growing up with their fathers. That is a fact. But when we buy into these false beliefs, because also behind it is also policies where people start saying, okay, now we can get money if we say that these fathers are not there, and we could create these programs. We can create programs like WIC. Well, WIC means women and children, women, infant, and children. So fathers are totally left out of the picture. And what we're seeing now is that you have a lot of fathers, one, who are actively involved, two, who is still there, but we have a lot of families that are living in poverty. And a lot of fathers really need resources and support, but the system is not designed to really support them and give them resources to help them along, as well as their family. So part of the thing for us is to look at some of these lies that have been told, but also for us to kind of like collectively come together to say, how do we take care of ourselves?
True.
Doc,
go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so that we have the fullness of the narrative, that as Brother Derek just shared, there are a couple different dynamics that go on. So historically, we know that the Black codes and the things that were going on during Jim Crowism, I say Jim Crowism is still alive and well. It just, morphed into other ways of presenting itself. And this is one of the ways that it has presented itself. Those laws that were put in place were intentional about weakening the Black family and breaking up the Black family. So we need to be mindful of that. But that wasn't the totality of the situation, and it still plays out today, although we have an evolution happening. The newspapers, which were the primary way that folks got information at that time before radio came in a significant way, also reinforced the false narratives. And because of those false narratives, then people are able to put policy in place, because instead of having hard statistics, they would utilize what was going on in the perception space, as folks have already called out. And that began to drive and reinforce racist beliefs. And those racist beliefs then began to frame out these sets of actions that would play out for decades upon decades upon decades. So that's the other part of it that we have to be able to unpack and dismantle as well. And that's why having platforms like this and the others that are owned by folks of color, or those allies who stand in authentic partnership, and making sure that there's truth that's being shared, because we have, now over 100+ years of false narratives that we have got to dismantle. And we see how easy it is for false narratives to find fertile ground and to take root. We can't be watering those. When we see what's going on with COVID, when we see what's going on with voter suppression and all these other types of things, that's being fueled by false narratives. And those same types of false narratives have been a part of the breaking up of the Black family, of the dehumanization of the Black man, trying to impact his masculinity and his ability to be able to give back. That's the false narrative. We know that brothers have been showing up all this time, actually giving back. And for those who haven't, we have a responsibility to work with them to help them to get the footing that they may need underneath of them. Because I've never met very few people who did not want to take care of their family, who did not want their children to be able to run and hug them and look them in the eyes with happiness and respect. And we've just got to make sure that continues to be where the spotlight is.
But how do we work on a system that's never kind of put together that benefits us? So how do we work beyond that parameter?
Well, you go ahead, Brother Derek.
I think in terms of where we are, I think sometimes we have to look at what we have. I think we have more than we think we have. So I think that right now, when we talk about social media, we have a lot of us that control our own platforms. You have a lot of us who have more followers and more viewers than some of the newspapers and the news. So when we can sort of come together collectively and say, it's not about me individually, but it's about us collectively, and really start presenting some of those messages, those positive messages, and start talking about uniting. Because what's happening is that too many of us are buying into these false narratives, but also we're buying into this whole concept about me, my brand. I can't support you. I can't work with you because it might mess up my brand. I can't post this on my page because it might mess up my brand. So we have more than enough, but we have to come together collectively to say, this is what we're going to do as a group. We're going to dismantle some of these false narratives. And we're going to make sure that all of us know. I'm going to continue to push it out. I'm going to give it to Ish. I'm going to give it to Dr. Ali. We're all going to be on the same page and work together to dismantle this stuff. Even when it comes to voting, you know, a lot of times, even in terms of black men don't vote. Black men collectively don't vote. And that's why in terms of when we were doing the Real Dads Vote, a lot of black fatherhood organizations didn't get behind it because they felt as though it wasn't something that was theirs. You know, so, and that's one of the problems, is that we're doing things where we're dividing ourselves as opposed to saying, you know, at the end of the day, it's about what's in the best interest, you know, in terms of us as a people. What you're doing with the Hip Hop Coalition, Hip Hop Caucus, that whole concept was about, we have to get out there, we have to change policies, we have to vote. So a lot of the young people got on board with that. And not only vote, but the whole thing also is we got to build institutions. You know, and that's the thing, is that we have more than enough, but we are so divided. We are so, in terms of the way we think, we're still wrapped up in this my, where it's like at the end of the day, man, it's about us collectively. We put our hands together and say, I'm going to win because we win, not because I win that I'll try to bring people along. It's about us collectively.
Without a doubt. I mean, you know, Brother Phillips just, you know, he just put it all out there for you. I mean, and it's not that difficult to do. Sometimes we think it's really difficult. You know, if we said every Friday or every Monday, whatever day you decide, that we're going to pull content together and we're going to have 25,000, just 25,000 black men, fathers, grandfathers, you know, everybody who's in the mix, who is going to retweet the information. Or go on Facebook and like it or whatever, you would actually be trending. Yeah. So if you're trending, then people are going to pay attention to it. They're going to come. They're going to, you know, sort of investigate what the content is. And you can begin to actually make sure that you are feeding them the true narrative of what's going on. You can highlight those who are doing exceptional work and then also help them to understand, you know, what the real statistics are. Of so many people who are giving back and who are being transformational, who never get a spotlight. So we could put a spotlight on the truth if we decided to. But as Brother Phillips said, you know, sometimes folks get a bit nervous and they're like, well, if I don't know if I can support you because I'm trying to do this or that, or I'm going to get a $12 check if I don't do this or that. And not understanding the totality of the power that exists inside of our communities. And that's the hardest thing for so many people, not just folks of color, to understand, is that, you know, that you literally have power unless you give it away. I talk about it all over the planet, and it's not that hard to actually utilize that power to really begin to make real change happen.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at, you know, and I go back to 1995. We didn't have social media. You tell me, how the hell you're going to get 1 million men in DC?
Yeah,
black men in DC. You didn't have social media. So now, knowing what we know now, the power of social media, we have some people who have followers of 5 million, 10. We can't get millions of people together, black men together, through social media to be on the same page.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think a little element is complacency. How do we kind of push complacency a lot away? Because I think that's one thing that hinders us. As, like, for example, like just election that just passed, we got a lot of black people out to vote, and they think like, oh, that's my job is done. But that's the easy part. The hard part is to stay focused on, like, what policy do you want implemented that's going to benefit the community. So can you kind of touch on that complacency element?
Well, I mean, you know, complacency can be defined in lots of different ways because folks give back in different ways. So we've got to make sure that we understand that there's lots of value in different things that people might do. You know, sometimes we only want to give the gold medal to the things that have been the traditional criteria for getting a gold medal in all aspects of life. So we got to begin to, you know, reframe what success looks like or what engagement looks like, or all these different types of titles that we put on that. And we've also got to help people to understand what the wins can look like, which we don't do enough about. I mean, nobody teaches you in high school or junior high school or even college. Lots of times we're taught a European model, right, which has some value. I'm not going to say it doesn't have any value. And that's the way that we operate. And the other part of it, the issue that we have to do is we have to also make sure that so many brothers know that, one, they're valued, and two, that we're building trust inside of our community. So I was, a student at the time of the Million Man March and played a role in helping to, do my tiny part around organizing. And, everybody trusted each other, right? Folks didn't know if 1 million people was going to show up, but we knew that we were committed, and that there were commonalities. There was a set of commonalities that everybody could get behind. And I think that's just another part of it, is that we have to figure out ways, one, to build trust, but two, we also got to anchor what we're asking people to actually get behind and things that are going to actually yield positive results. And that's why when you go and look at voting in the last election, you had a certain percentage of brothers who didn't vote, but you also had another percentage of brothers who voted for someone, and they have every right to, who did not necessarily reflect what we would think are the priorities for our communities, or they never showed any, care for our communities in the past, except when they needed to try and get your vote. Yeah. So we have to do a better job. And when I say we, I'm talking about the collective we, of helping brothers to understand that we have rights. And part of those rights is lifting our expectations. Yeah. Because we lower our expectations in our community way too often. And I get where some of that comes from. We're so used to struggling and fighting for some bare minimums that's where we operate sometimes. And then there are the other folks who say, well, no, it doesn't have to be this way. And, we were having this conversation around policy, and we'll unpack that, which plays a role in helping us to meet the raising of those expectations. And we have to build that into the accountability process. But we can change this dynamic, but I think it comes down to trust. It comes down into a collective commonality of where we're trying to go. And then it comes to some folks going to also have to roll up your sleeves, even if you're tired, because our forefathers knew what tired was being about. I get, folks, because you got additional mental stressors and all these other types of things going on. Let me just call it out, because I believe in real talk. If folks don't like it, you can always you can DM me or whatever you need to do, and we can get at it. But the reality of the situation is that and we ain't talking about 150 years ago. Our fathers, grandfathers, they worked double shifts, and then sometimes they had a garden, or they had to go and do other things in the community to help hold it down. And they had all of the external pressures that were happening from racism. Yep. So I get, we all have worked, 10, 12 hours a day. Some of us work 18 hours a day. But we also got to say, you know what? If we really want our communities to be all that we know that they can be and are, then that means that we just got to put that little bit of extra in it. We got to make sure that, our sons and nieces and nephews and everybody else, knows that when they take the baton, that change can really happen, because we're doing the work in this moment.
That's true.
And I agree wholeheartedly, and just to add to what you're saying as well. And I think another component is that we have to get back to that history part. And I think when it comes to us, we sort of detach ourselves from the history. The reason why we're where we are today is because of those who have come before us. So when we look at, I keep going back to, the Million Man March. It's like, listen, you had 1.7 million Black men that registered to vote. It's like, so we have an example. We have an example of a collective people coming together with a common agenda. Who, I know we can talk about, there were some issues with people saying in terms of the leadership. At the end of the day, a lot of people left that march and they made a pledge, and they were committed to going back to their communities to uplift it. So a lot of out of the Million Man March. When we talk about the Million Father March in schools, dad take your child to school, that came out of the Million Man March. You know, we talk about Eagle Academy, that came out of the spirit of the Million Man March. You know, when we talk about the fact that, you know, 25,000 babies were adopted, that came out of the Million Man March. So a lot of these things that we talk about today, you know, have this spirit of the Million Man March, that had the spirit of Black men saying, you know what, it's not about me individually, but it's about us collectively. Yeah, and that's the stuff that we got to really come back to, and that whole thing about just trusting each other. You know, we got to be able to trust each other, but we also got to just understand that, you know, a lot of us younger generation have sort of almost disconnected from the older generation. So we got to bridge that gap and sort of bring us together. And I think it's on us, the older generation, to make that happen.
Right. And then the one thing too is that numbers never lie, because I know that's the one thing, you know, you were pushing, I think, was it a year ago, was the Census Bureau.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Man, we did the, you know, one of the things, see, I'm this person where I'm like, I can't just say something if I don't attach some action to it. So I'm not going to say, you know, you talk about this. So we got to do something. You got to take action. You know, so we said, you know, with the census, it's like Black people, we have to complete the census. A lot of funding is geared towards the census. So, and a lot of Black people are like, well, I don't want people to know my business. I don't trust them. Trust. I get it. We don't trust them. But the reality is, this is the game we're in. And we got to play by these rules. We got to figure out how to master these rules so that it benefits us. You know, so you can't like not afford to not complete the census. So we created this Black Fathers United for the Census. So we're able to get a lot of the social media Black father groups on board, which is great. But the thing is the sustainability. And that's the other issue we have in terms of we'll do things for the moment, but we don't have that sustainability. You know, and that's another area where we're lacking in terms of that sustainability. So that's one of the things, again, I'm going to take some responsibility and say it has to be from the older generation, that we have to kind of like make sure that we go back and really educate, you know, our younger brothers about the importance of, you know, and not just educate, but we have to model. You know, because it's not, you know, when we talk so much, we always talk about what we need to do. It's not what we need to do, it's what we need to model. Right. So just let that model be that, you know, lesson. So I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to say, kind of look at the model. And that's that example.
And I definitely understand that, because I think that's one of the things that I think, if you think about Samantha Abrams' struggle, is like they got all these Black people to vote, but she has an issue of keeping them abroad to say, hey, the job's not done. You know, this is other things we got to do. You can't just vote and just walk away. We have to create a system. We have to create a farm system, something, a level of consistency. And I think that's the one thing that was frustrated with you too, is with the Census Bureau. It's like, yeah, you got to fill it out, but it's still more to this process too.
You got to vote.
Right. So let me just add something to what Brother Philip shared with you, because I know a lot of brothers and sisters are, you know, you didn't want to fill out the census because they was worried that the government would get your information. So let me just tell y'all something. So I worked at the highest levels in the government for a number of years. I worked on Capitol Hill, I worked for federal agencies, and I advised White Houses. They got your information. So we just need to let that go, right? I mean, the majority of your information, like 99% of it, folks can get to or already got. So the question is, as Brother Philip shared, is how are we going to make sure that we are utilizing the system? You know, we can begin to unpack it, dismantle it, and rebuild parts of it. And I agree that that should happen. But if we're not in the mix, then it is going to continue to benefit others. And of course, your vote is so critically important. But as Brother Phillips just said, there's two parts to this. One, you got to get engaged with that census, because that's where the resources are being allocated, and they're going to go for all kinds of things that are going on inside of your life. And the second part is the voting consistently. If we get Black and brown and young people to vote consistently for a decade, you will get the right policies in place if you also make sure that we're putting the right people in office. And that means that we have to be really engaged with the vetting of folks. They can look like us, but we still need to be vetting them. And we need to make sure they understand very clearly that we're going to give you this shot. It's almost like when you get a chance to, you might get a shot on to join the football team or the dance group or whatever it is. You get a shot. Now, what you do with that shot, we watching you. And if you're not going to do it right, then we're going to find somebody else. And you should give consideration to running for office yourself, whether it's on the local, the county, the state, or the federal level. Because if you're looking for somebody who's real, ain't many people going to be realer than you. But of course, you got to convince other people, and you got to show folks that you're going to actually do the right things. So that's that two parts. And then, then we can get to the policy part, because the policy part don't start until we get the right people in office and consistently have them in there, because policy ain't an overnight thing. We can begin to plant the right seeds, but then you got to continually water them time and time and time again. And that will also change the dynamics inside of our communities. I see Brother Phillips. I think he about to drop some more knowledge on y'all.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you said that, Dr. Ali, because that is a long process. And that's one of the things sometimes we think everything happens overnight, and like I say, at the end of the day, it's not about us individually, and we have to look ahead. We're planting these seeds because we want the tree to grow. And when that tree finally grows, we may not be there, but that's okay. Because those who have come before us did the work so we can even be free, so we can even have the opportunity. And they knew they weren't going to be there, but they sacrificed their lives to make sure that we have the opportunity. So we have to do that same sacrifice, but we have to put in the work.
And then also putting in the work, you have all these Black father organizations all over the country. Why have you seen a huge advocacy group going to Washington to focus on policies that benefits Black fathers? Why do you see there a dynamic of a struggle with that? Because you see other organizations, other groups, they have advocacy groups. They go to Washington, they pull on those politicians, and they get what they want. Why is there a struggle in the Black father organizations when it comes to that?
Man, I'm going to take full responsibility for that. I'm going to take responsibility for that. And the reason why I'm going to take responsibility for that, because I consider myself to be one of the leaders in the field. And I think I have to, on my end, do a better job of, really leading people towards that. So I know we have a lot of younger people who are started getting into this fatherhood space, but a lot of them are approaching it from, which is fine, they're approaching it from the business of fatherhood. So there's a business of father, because now it's like I can have all these numbers, I can get sponsors, so I can sell my shirts, my merch. So I get that, and there's nothing wrong with making money, but they're missing that other component, which is it's about the collectiveness. It's still about the group. So I would have to say, for me personally, I have to do a better job of really leading those people in the right direction.
Can I be transparent, Uncle Derek? Can I be transparent, please? Okay. I've been behind the scenes, and I'm going to be honest. You tried your darnest to do the best you can. But sometimes what happens is when people are not listening, they're not listening. Because you have a scenario where people already make their mind up. This is where they're focused their path on. And there's nothing much you could do. You can show them the blueprint, the strategy. You can be Bill Belichick and say, I want like 5 Super Bowls. Just do this and it's going to work. But they're not going to follow it. So I don't want you to put the full responsibility on yourself, because it's not fair. Because again, you've been in this space for 2 decades. And I'm going to be truly transparent. It's like people need to honestly come to you when it comes to things like that. Instead of thinking that they know everything, or they play like they don't know, but they do know. So I'm just going to put that out there. So don't put that on.
No, but as the elders, as the older people, we take responsibility, because we know that at the end of the day, in terms of change is going to be made from us, and we're going to model that behavior. And if you don't get this person, you're going to get people along the way who's going to make that difference. So you can do it.
I'll just say, as somebody who's led in other movements, you got to have that support also from others to keep you lifted up, to keep you surrounded and protected. Because sometimes when you push, and especially when you're pushing on something that is changing what the popular society might believe, folks got to just make sure that they are giving you all that energy and love that's necessary. And then there's a couple of other pieces also. And Brother Phillips, I mean, you're a leader in this space, so this may or may not be necessary. But I think that there's some responsibility also from the foundations and the funders in this space to also make sure that the organizations have that capacity that allows them to reach the masses, that allows them to have the space and the freedom to work on policy on the state level and the federal level, that allows folks to create the association who will then be on Capitol Hill 5 days a week or 7 days a week, working with those congressmen and women and senators as they're crafting legislation, as they're making decisions about resources are going to flow. So, there are a number of different components, I think, that are critical to helping your leadership and others to be able to be that transformative force that you have been doing, and to be able to expand that.
Yeah, no, good point. Good point.
And I totally agree with that. And when it comes to transformation, when it comes to policy, most of the time it starts on the local level. It has to start from the local level. And I know that's what you're doing there in New York. So talk about some of the policies that, you're kind of pushing on in New York that could probably start from New York that people can catch on all over the country. Because I know the one that comes to mind is the same parenting.
Where parenting. Yeah, the shared parenting.
Which is in every state, and the only state that passed it is Kentucky. So talk about that.
Yeah, the shared parenting bill simply states that if you have a mother and father who have a child and they're separate, but providing there are no issues of domestic violence, no issues of child abuse, custody should start at 50-50. So there's only one state that has that that passed that law, and that was Kentucky, and that was passed, I think, in 2018. So when we look at this issue of policy, one of the reasons why that law has been tough to pass in New York, and it's been on the book in New York for over 20 years. So a number of senators and assembly people have sponsored the bill. But one of the issues that we have, and this is around the country, every state just about has a shared parenting bill on the books. But one of the issues that we have is a lot of people are not aware of the bill itself. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. Just one, bring awareness. And then two, once you start bringing the awareness, and you've been on the Hill, so all this, you bring that awareness, and you got to build your coalition. And to get a bill passed, you have to get senators on board. You have to get assembly people on board, who are going to say, I'm going to be behind this bill. And that requires a lot of work, and that can take sometimes years to get them to actually want to sponsor a bill, because you're talking about a bill where some people are looking at it as being a bill for men. So part of the thing is that this is not a bill for fathers. This is a bill that just simply states, based on the research states that children do better when both parents are actively involved. So to build this coalition, you're not talking about just getting fathers, you're talking about women groups as well. There's a group shared on women for shared parenting. So you need all of these people on board to get a bill passed, but a lot of people are not aware of the bill. So what we're trying to do, one, is bring awareness, and also get, I've met with a couple of senators, I've met with a couple of assembly people to try to get them on board. But you're not going to get them on board until you build that coalition and you start holding people accountable. And you start saying, like, listen, I know, your term is coming up. These are the numbers we have. If you are not going to get behind what we're doing, then we are not going to support your bill. And that's why when you talk about a lot of the politicians, they tend to gravitate towards women because women vote. Mm-hmm. One politician said, listen, why am I going to get behind that to push that when here it is, men don't vote? And you have the national organization for women who are saying, listen, we vote. So any policies that you pass, and even when it comes to fatherhood programs, all the programs have things in there about domestic violence, because they've stated that men are violent, and we want to make sure any fatherhood program that you do, that you have that as part of your policy.
Wow.
Well, I think
So again,
go ahead, Brother Phillips. I'm sorry, it was a delay.
yeah. Oh yeah, but it's like, but that's the whole thing. It's like in terms of we have to bring awareness, but people have to come out and vote, but we also have to build coalitions.
I think the other part is looking at these opportunities that exist in some of these bills that we know there's a lot of attention on, and making sure that we're building content and criteria inside of them as well. So you've got the American Families Plan, that $1.8 trillion that's supposed to go to that. So how do we make sure that as those dollars are flowing from the feds to the states and then down to the counties and to the local level, that there's real accountability in there for strengthening our families and for also finding ways of strengthening fathers' relationship in that space. You know, there are a number of different components that will help men to be in a better position. So hopefully that they can continue to give back even a greater way to their families. And then when you look at the infrastructure bills and beginning to think more critically about, you know, how does that once again help to strengthen families of color? How does that create new opportunities so that fathers have additional resources that they can invest in their families? So I think, you know, we just got to figure out where all the sets of opportunities are so that when each bill moves forward, that there's a piece that's in there that strengthens, you know, families in the greater context. And then also making sure that we're also zeroing in on how do we help to strengthen Black men in the process.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier, is just using this platform where we're talking about this and we're all sharing this information throughout. So now it's like, these are the pictures that go viral, or the stories that go viral that we're having, you know, the educational stories, as opposed to when it comes to us, it's always about, we're looking at these men, you know, they have their kids, you know, it's nice, they're hugging their kids and they walk into the store, they're playing. What you get on social media is not the full story.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a made up story. That's what they want you to see. A lot of those dads that you're seeing that are hugging their kids, that are playing, a lot of them are going through a lot of stuff.
Wow.
They're dealing with a lot of mental health issues, anxiety, depression. You know, they're going through issues in terms of child support. They're just going through just issues in terms of unemployment. So a lot of them, you know, are just going through a lot. But yet when we look at this social media, we're like, wow, they're smiling. Yeah. That's not the whole story. A lot of men are struggling. And a lot of men need support, because the way this system is designed is that they talk about the absence of Black fathers being a problem. No, the absence of Black fathers are not the problem. The problem is the absence of support and resources for Black fathers. That's the problem.
And do you think one of the biggest problems, because again, it's this legacy of strap your boots up and just figure it out your own. And so because of that is embedded in us for the longest time, that's why do you think that plays a role too?
Well, it plays a role because we've been socialized to view things a certain way. So therefore we think that as a man, you know, I have to do this. I don't need help. You know, I gotta take this journey myself. And that's why we have our Real Dads Club meeting. The whole thing with that group, it's about men saying, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable. Vulnerable is actually your strength. When you're saying, you know what, I need help. You know, I'm going through a situation with my child. I'm going through a situation with the mother, you know, with my wife, with my significant other. When you can say that and say, I need help, and have people that can support you, that's the strength. But when you're holding it in and you feel as a man, you know, I have to do this. You know, as men, we've been socialized so much where we focus on everything on the outside that we don't focus on ourselves. Mm-hmm. We make sure everyone else is taken care of, but we don't take care of ourselves. And the first thing is that if you really want to be this strong dad to your family and community, you have to take care of yourself first. Yeah. How are you going to uplift the family if you don't have the strength to do it? Yeah. You know, so, but those are the things that we have to, you know, that's why it's important for men to just really engage in conversations, real conversations with other men. And we don't really have those spaces to really do that.
That's so true. You got something to say, Doc?
No, I totally get what Brother Phillips is saying, because, well, one, we know in our community in totality, in dealing with mental health stressors has never been something that we were allowed to talk about, right? It was always taboo. Sisters always had other sisters to talk to. Thankfully, that's a blessing. Where brothers, you never were allowed to show any weakness. You can't show weakness sometimes inside your house or outside your house because somebody coming for you. That ain't always the case, but it does happen. And then you have all these because everybody knows I got a public health background, so I understand how these stressors then translate. They translate into cancers. They translate into liver and kidney diseases. They transfer into hypertension and a number of other things. And so when you understand the totality of that, and then you overlay that with the fact of the wealth gap that exists inside of our community, where, lots of times whoever is a breadwinner or winners in family won't go to the doctor until the last minute, which then, causes all these other types of situations, because now you have even stronger sets of economic things that are on top of you, because before, when you could have got some help early on, which would have cost less and made that initial investment, now you're spending a huge amount of money on the back end, or you don't do anything, which is for far too many people, and you're actually shrinking your life, which causes additional stressors in the family. So there's all the cyclical stuff that goes on that when we're not able to actually begin to address something when it's first starting or in the early stages, then it causes us so much additional pain and trauma, for sometimes for years to come. And then we teach our kids that.
You pass it down.
Watch us.
Generational trauma.
Yeah. So they're like, well, dad didn't, go to the doctor, or dad didn't talk to somebody when he was stressed out, or dad didn't take time off from work because he was always grinding, because the system had set up where he could only work in a certain strata where he had to work 2 jobs, or mom as well. And so we got that dynamic that goes on when we pass it from generation to generation to generation, and it continues to weaken the structures, the infrastructure underneath of the family.
And this has been a great conversation. What do you see are the 3 important policies that Black fathers need to put to the table when it comes to policy-wise?
Boy, there's so many policies.
But like the 3, because I know how government works, you're not going to get everything you want. But what are the 3 critical issues that, let's say, will be the next thing if we get Black fathers to come together and be an advocacy group and start pitching these policies to local or even the federal? What are the 3 key policies you think?
Well, I think one I'm going to say, it's going to be not the 3 policies, but it's just going to be, I think we need to hold the government accountable. So if you put something in the books, we need to hold you accountable for it. I'm going to just say there was a law that was passed last August 20th called the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. Frederica Wilson was a senator. No, she was an assembly person that sponsored it in Florida. Rubio sponsored it on the Senate side, and they both passed. Trump signed it into law in August 2020. So now this is a law, and this law states that historically federal agencies have created barriers and obstacles so Black men and boys were not able to succeed. And they talked about it in terms of fatherhood. They talked about it in terms of education, in terms of the judicial system. So we need to bring awareness to this law, and we all need to be aware of this law. And we need to say we need to hold you accountable in regards to what comes out of this law. So if you're going to put this as a law, we want to make sure you uphold the law and hold you accountable. To remove those barriers and obstacles from all those different agencies that have created barriers and obstacles so that men have created policies so that Black men and boys are not able to advance. So we want to make sure we hold you accountable and that we remove all these obstacles and barriers.
What you got, Doc?
My three things. The first one would be mental health. I think it's critically important. So there is a mental health caucus that's on Capitol Hill. I participated, every now and then. I haven't been to every event that they've done, but they do send me information, and I've worked with some of the congresspersons who are a part of that. But I have never seen a specific focus on African American men. I have seen really great work that's happening in the space, and there may have been, and I just didn't see that particular one. But that means there needs to be more, because I have, been in and out. So that would be one of the areas that I'd like to see there be more attention and more resources, and then those resources actually translating to the ground. The other part is infrastructure and jobs. And the reason I say that, because we have to live in healthy communities, right? So whether we're talking about the transportation for people being able to actually get to work, or the housing that's so necessary, all of these things can lessen the stress in our lives and can help us to build wealth. And of course, the job aspect is tied to that infrastructure bill, if you will. And I hope folks will go and really take a strong look at what's being proposed, and then make sure you're engaging both on the federal and the state level with folks about what your expectations are as those dollars make it to the states. And then the other part is the education, right? So we know that education can be transformational, but we got to make sure that the education sets of opportunities that are being created are created in a way that resonate with folks, and are not necessarily just the traditional systems that are often utilized. So we got to get resources into the hands of folks who know how to talk to folks, who know how to reach folks, who know what's going on in folks' life. And I think if we do those three things, and I'm sure there are others that are critically important, I think it begins to make sure that we've got a stronger foundation underneath of us. Every time the president comes on, or a number of other folks, they talk about infrastructure. Well, there is an infrastructure inside the infrastructure, and that is the family. Those are the individuals that we got to lift up, and we got to make sure that they have what's necessary. Sisters will appreciate, us making sure that we are getting stronger and healthier, and being able to continue to lead if we are leading, and if we are, reality is there are some brothers who are falling behind, that we are reaching back and pulling them up and helping to make sure there's real accountability there. And it all comes back down to that policy stuff and to voting, and of course our own personal accountability. But when people say personal accountability, if the other things are out of whack, it makes it real hard for you to have your own personal accountability when you ain't got clean air to breathe, or when your kids is drinking dirty water, or if you can't catch the train or the bus to be able to get to work. So that's why I pull all these things together. We have to have a comprehensive strategy. And like we were talking about earlier, a part of that comprehensive strategy is bringing all these different organizations together who are going to be authentic in this space, holding each other accountable, and also magnifying, the greatness that exists inside of Black men, and actually putting that in the forefront, so that we balance out. When folks throw something, you know how it is. You can do 10 great things. If you do one bad thing, people will focus on that bad thing. So we need, 10,000 true, authentic stories about the greatness that's going on by Black men, so that no matter who it is brings in the other stuff, we don't neglect it. We make sure that we're analyzing it, but we don't let it throw us off of where we need to go.
That's right. And that's so true. And hopefully this starts this discussion with other people, because this conversation needs to happen. And that's the one thing that kind of makes me frustrated, is that we don't have this conversation. We talk about like why Disney and Netflix don't show more images of Black fathers and this and that, which, I understand you want to see more yourself on TV, but what about the stuff that affects you on an everyday basis? And I think that's important. And I think this conversation needs to go on. Before we end this, any words of wisdom?
Go ahead, Brother Phillips.
My whole thing is just always about, if everyone just can do a little part, we all have the capacity to just do something, and my thing is, if you can just do something, that'll just be, that'll help in regards to the whole picture. Just play a part, whatever part that is, whatever little role that is. If everybody does a little part, then we can win an Oscar. because to win an Oscar requires everyone just to do a little something. We have the person on lighting, we have the person in the script, we have the person with the wardrobe, we have the person who's the lead, we have the supporting cast. You have all these different roles, and there's a role for everyone. But we can all win at the end, but we all have to just play our parts. And we have to play it well.
Mm. The fullness of the narrative. The fullness of the narrative.
Mm.
Well, I'll share the same closing remarks that I've shared. This year, I will have reached 1 million people, not on TV and not on the radio, that stuff I've done, but, you know, just actually, you know, in conversations and speeches and all this other type of stuff. And it's that you have power unless you give it away. And we have to translate that power into strengthening our communities in all the forms and fashions that are necessary. And if we don't do that, someone will utilize your power to continue to try and deteriorate our communities and to take opportunities away from ourselves and our future generations.
And that's it. I don't have anything to say after that. That's perfect. But again, I want to thank you guys for jumping on. This was a great conversation, and hopefully we could do this in the future. I'm just gonna put this out there, Doc. You're welcome to come to the Real Dads Club. They would love to have you come speak. You know, because you know they're a bunch of great guys, and they would love to hear your words of wisdom.
You got me. Whenever you need me.
We're gonna set it up. We're gonna set it up.
We got it on recording. You see that? We got it on recording. I'll just play. But fellas, thank you very much, and we're out. Peace.
Dr. Ali, thank you, and Ish, thank you, man. Appreciate you so much, man.
All right. Shout out to the A in Brooklyn.